Welcome to the wide world of Scrum. I'm very excited to have you. So in this conversation, we're going to be basically having a brief overview on what is Agile, what is Scrum, what is, what are all these things, and why do they work, and why do people like them a lot? And obviously, we'll talk. You spoke last time about wanting to know more about construction, and we can bring that, and we'll have to go over that in a bit. So let's jump into it. You should be able to see my slides. So real quick, I always like to start off with some quick disclaimers, which is I'm not affiliated with the Scrum Alliance, Scrum.org, or any other Scrum organization. I am most certainly not an authorized trainer for any of these organizations, and this presentation doesn't qualify you for the CSM. You don't need a class to take the PSM. You can just take it straight up. This theoretically should be enough, but I'm not going to promise you anything. Make sure to do practice tests, practice questions before you take any exam. Just a good rule of thumb. Some quick disclaimers so no one sues me. Alright, so in the beginning, you might be more familiar with the predictive or traditional model of project management. It's called predictive. And essentially, that is when you plan the whole project, build the whole project, QA the whole project, and then deliver the whole project. The keywords here are two things. Number one, you are doing it in its entirety. You're planning everything down to the last thing that you do. And then, generally speaking, you hand off the project. The purple arrows indicate a handoff, where one team is the project managers, they plan, then you hand it over to the builders, and the builders build, and then the QA team, which is just completely disconnected from either the previous two steps, they come in and they do the whole QAing of it. And then when QA is done, they just toss it. They either toss it back to the builders to rebuild something, or they toss it straight to the marketers, and or the people who are connected to the customers to deliver things. I think that predictive, it just kind of comes natural to human beings. It's not something that we're taught. It's just something that makes sense to us to just do things in phases. But there's some challenges to that, and there's some problems with that, and I'll show you exactly what that is. So imagine, I don't know if you've ever tried to do like any project, but I'm sure you have. And imagine you have this great idea, and you can't believe no one's done it before or thought of it before, and so you develop it in silence, in darkness, completely, because it's not ready yet. It's hard to explain your vision. You don't really care about their feedback. It's your vision. Who cares what they think? They wouldn't get it until they see it in action, and it kills the grand reveal. It's so cool to like show all your friends you did something without like beating them over the head with it. So you build this product in darkness, no feedback, no approval. You plan it, build it, QA it, and you hide it away until it's like totally ready, and you take it to market, and it like bombs super hard. It is a miserable experience because it's buggy, it's boring, it's confusing to use. Amazon already does it. Maybe the market like never actually wanted it. This happens a lot, and you wasted a lot of time and money on a product that nobody asked for. It sucks. So what went wrong? Well, you already know who I am, but I do have a game. I developed like a text-based game for iOS and Android about Scrum. Feel free to play it if you'd like. But I'm a project manager. I'm a Scrum master, aspiring Scrum trainer, and I love Scrum to get organized. It helps me manage my responsibilities, including raising my kids, and you can even use it to develop and lead workshops and I'll get to that in just a moment. So is this because I am a weirdo, or I drank the Kool-Aid, or I'm a paid testimonial, or I'm just kind of like a LinkedIn influencer? And the answer is no. Well, kind of a bit weirdo. That first one's okay, but I really love Agile and I love Scrum because it is flexible, it helps you pace yourself, it has built-in self-improvement, and it prevents you from being like a helicopter parent or helicopter project manager. So how are you going to do it? Well, I'm going to explain it. So away from the introductions, and now we're going to get back into the content. Before we go into learning about Agile, which is our next subject, I think it's really important that you understand that when you're doing the PMP, it's very, there's inputs, there's outputs, there's processes and tools. It feels very mechanical and methodical, and it's just based on sort of like understanding what to use when. And by contrast, Agile is more of a philosophy, and Scrum is a framework for implementing that philosophy. So as we're doing things, and as you're sort of relating this back to your work, remember, you don't need to understand every specific thing down to the word of why we do of what we do in Scrum, right? The question is why we do it. If you can understand the why, you'll be much better off than most people who have a certified Scrum Master certification. Just because you can do Scrum mechanically and you understand what each meeting or each ceremony or each whatever we do does not mean you understand Scrum and you don't understand Agile. It's about you don't understand if you don't know the why. So we're going to jump into Agile. And by the way, jump in if you have questions, of course. So as I said earlier, Agile is a baseline philosophy that Scrum implements, and it's important to understand Agile to figure out how and why we get to Scrum. So a lot of people think the Agile Manifesto is like this 700-page document that is like as long as the PMBOK, and it's actually so small and so simple that it actually fits on half a slide. Basically, back in 2001, some very smart people created a revolutionary document called the Agile Manifesto, and I'll just read it to you. Every section of this is useful, and you'll see that very soon. We are uncovering better ways of developing software and by doing it and helping others do it. Through this, we've come to value individuals' interactions over processes and tools, working software, asterisk, over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan. That is, while there's value on the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. I put in the asterisk is my addition because it says developing software, but it can actually be used for developing literally anything. It doesn't have to be software. So that's pretty cool. Now we're gonna break this down. But some people said, okay, that's cool, but that's poetry. What does that mean? And so these individuals came back in 2001, and they created these 12 principles of Agile. Now, we're going to go through it. Okay, I know it's like, and again, don't think about like, I have to memorize everything. Just, if you can grab onto something that makes a lot of sense to you to adapt to work, and then you bring it and adapt it into working, and then when you feel comfortable, you bring something else in, like, don't expect to memorize it again. Understand the why, bring it in as it makes sense. So let's jump into it. The first principle, arguably the most important, but that's my opinion. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Hello, thank you for joining us. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So what exactly does this mean? So this principle guides how you work with your team. So when you're thinking about, I need to make improvements to my team, a lot of the times people will look towards what process are they using and what tools are they using. I had a CEO who was very famous for when he wasn't very famous. It was a small company that went under, but what was hilarious about him and the company was whenever something like disastrous happened, like something broke or we were embarrassed in some way, or he felt the need to like make improvements in some way to the company, what he would do was, and I'm not joking, he would rearrange where people sat. He'd be like, you sit over here and you sit over there, and I want to switch you two, and he just like forced everyone to switch their seats because he thought that that was like making a big difference, and that people, it was ridiculous. So again, people's tools and people's processes are important, right? As it says on the bottom of the slide, there's more valuable. There's items that are, the items on the right are valuable, but the most important thing is your individuals and how they interact. If people are working well together, if they're high-fiving, if they are collaborating well, then everything else will. Then the other things are important, but that's the most important thing to look out for. And this guides how you work with your team. Let's look at 6 principles. Again, if you can just pick one that like really resonates with you, that's more than enough. Business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. So remember, in our original example, we talked about handoff. People are constantly handing things off to one another. We're not doing that anymore. People are working together throughout the project. Build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment and the support they need, and trust them to get the job done. So this is also really, this is like the whole helicopter boss thing. You're not doing that. You're giving people the environment and support they need, and you're going to trust them to get the job done because they're going to, based on how they interact with each other. The most effective, and this is going to be the tough one in post-COVID world, but the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. Right? Slack is really popular. Zoom is super popular. Generally speaking, when people are together, the closer they are, the more they're communicating, the more they're interacting with one another, the better it is. Even if there's a lot of remote teams, bringing everyone together for like one day can be, not a week, but maybe a sprint can be very helpful. Agile promotes, this is another good one. I think they're all really good, but some of them really stick out. Promote sustainable development. Everyone should be moving at a constant pace indefinitely. And what that means is if you find yourself bringing people in on the weekend or doing weekend work a lot, that's bad because that's not sustainable indefinitely. Everybody needs to be able to be sustained indefinitely. The best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. Again, we went over what self-organizing means. Self-organizing teams means a self-organizing team is a team in which everyone who needs to do the job is on one team. So the team has a builder representative, a QA representative, a marketing representative. There's representatives for everyone that touches the project on one team. They are self-organized. That's not what self-organizing means, but self-organizing is just that they don't need managerial approval, but cross-functional. I define cross-functional. Excuse me. At regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. So basically, they review their work and they adjust accordingly, making sure they're on the right path, that they're using the right tools, that they're doing things as efficiently as possible. So working software over comprehensive documentation. This is a kind of a planning-based principle. You don't plan everything up front. You plan what your team is going to work on for the immediate future and use that as a means for guiding the project. This actually has two of my favorite principles, and I mean that. It's the first and the third one. The first one, simplicity. The art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. This is a very important one. Ask yourself, what is the most important thing that we need? Keep it simple. Keep it as my ex-boss once said, KISS. Keep it super simple. Don't throw in a bunch of tools and things that will get people lost or confused. Keep it simple. Continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. That's just don't do shoddy work that you have to do over again. If you ask someone, you're in construction, so Uber, so I think you may know the phrase "do it nice" or "do it twice," where if you're using trash methodologies or trash techniques and bad materials, you're just going to end up doing the work again for twice the money. And then I think this third one is my actual favorite. There's top two, but this one's my favorite. Working software is the primary measure of progress. Now again, working for you, if you're in construction, it's not going to be software, but it's to just keep in mind something functional that you can use, measure, get feedback on, experience is your primary measure of progress. I volunteer for nonprofit work, and this group is just like the meeting machine. They just have meetings to have meetings about meetings when they do meetings and meetings. They don't do anything but meetings, and then complain about things that they need to do with their meetings. Work is so slow, and I just have to keep reminding them, and I keep trying to see this shit. Guys, meetings are not our primary measure of progress. Our primary is actually doing things of value. So that's my number one favorite. Anytime I feel like I'm just getting lost in the weeds on like my project, I'll just stop planning and I'll just start doing, because it's time to start making progress, and you can't lose track of that. Against my favorite. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. This principle guides your relationship to the customer. So you have your working software, your working functional product, and you want your customer to get some feedback on it. So our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software or equipment. So you want to deliver early and you want to deliver continuously. And then the second one is deliver working software frequently from a couple weeks to a couple months with a preference of the shorter time scale. The big feedback that you want to get here is that when you're working with a customer, they don't just drop requirements and disappear till the end of the project. You're just, even if it's something minor, show them and involve them as much as it makes sense. Don't bother them. But if something is starting to go, like if you have something to show them that's real and functional, show it to them. Ask them their thoughts. If they like it, great. If they don't, start considering some sort of rework. Again, these are things that maybe are a little bit trickier in construction, but you can incorporate a lot of these ideas. And the final one, responding to change over following a plan. This is a principle that guides your execution of your project. So as you collaborate with your customer, they're going to give you feedback. You're going to incorporate that feedback. Welcome changing requirements, even late in development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. So there's two things to notice. Each of the principles is built on and around, I should say and around, individuals and interactions. And each principle, I'd say, builds on top of one another. But there's one question that many people have when they have it, which is, how do you get individuals who can build projects when given the environment support they need and trust them to get the job done? Right? How do you do that? Because for many people, they just have a team of like dudes and people, and they don't know how to do any of this. And so, how do I get them going? Like, do I have to spend like 60? Should I send them to a 6-month boot camp or a 2-year boot camp? And the answer is no, because the Agile Manifesto actually tells it to you in the secret passage. It's not actually secret, right? You may overlook it. People think that this first paragraph is just kind of like a cute, flowery introductory paragraph, but it is not. It is arguably the most important part, which is we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. So what that means essentially is you bring your team together and you find one of the 12 principles we just went over, and you go up to your team and you go, guys, I'm letting you know, we're doing a great job. I'm thinking about improving things. I heard about this thing called Agile. Here's 1 or 2 principles of Agile. Let's think about ways we can incorporate this into our work. And at first it might suck, or people will be confused, or people will be uncomfortable by it. But as they sort of get acclimated to it, as it gets adjusted to make sense for the team, then you start to see some good value coming out there. So you uncover better ways of doing the work you need to do. Replace developing software where it makes sense, but by just starting by doing your work, by doing the work that you're required to do, and helping other people do the work they're required to do, and by incorporating these little changes. So that's how you can, and we can talk in more specific details on construction if you're interested. But that's the essence of Agile. We're actually like at the end of Agile. But if you want to get to Scrum, there's some questions still, which is what actions do we do to train and empower our individuals to build efficiently? What does working software actually mean? How and when do we involve our customers? Do we just bother them every 15 minutes? And when do we respond to change? Do I respond to change every minute of every day? And the answer is no, but we're going to move on to that. And hello, Zora. Thank you so much for joining as well. Do either of you have any questions I can answer? Happy to do so. Awesome. That's cool. Then we'll continue. So now that you know what we're trying to accomplish, we can talk about the framework to make that happen, which is Scrum. So you know that like our general principles we're trying to figure out. Now we're going to figure out how we're going to get to Scrum. So we get we get individuals who are interacting, working software, customer collaboration, responding to change by using a framework that prioritizes 3 pillars. We want to be transparent to everyone. We want to do we want to inspect. The team must inspect itself, and it must adapt to change. It must adapt itself to serve its goals. These are the 3 pillars of Scrum. We'll get to that. So here we are. We're actually going to talk about Scrum, right? Scrum, at its simplest, is the following. It is 5 events. You can think of it as 4 events. It's technically, so I hate that they do this. They call the sprint an event. I don't agree with that. It's just it's not. So, but it is in the Scrum Manifesto, and if you want to pass the exam, then it's an event. But it's real. But in my opinion, it's 4 events: planning, review, retrospective, and the stand-up. It's 3, used to be called roles, now they're called accountabilities. The Scrum Master, the product owner, and its developers. And there's 3, I would say 2 artifacts, which is the product backlog and the sprint backlog, but technically the increment is a backlog. But my suggestion, especially when you're new, and even when you're advanced, just don't consider the increment an artifact or the sprint an event. It's a little bit confusing. But we're going to get through it. So I'm going to start with the accountabilities. This is the most text-heavy slide on the presentation. So apologies for that. We have 3 accountabilities. Number 1, product owner. This person's role is to understand the market. So now we're getting into the actual doing of business. We have a market, and this person's responsibility is to understand that market and the stakeholders. They spend most of their time conducting market research and meeting with stakeholders. And they also own what's called the product backlog, which you will understand more of later. So every project begins with the product. You need to know what you're building, and your product owners can tell you what you're building. You have developers in construction. They're probably just called workers. They are the people who are doing the work. So coding, building, QA, and they own the sprint backlog, which I'll explain later. As I mentioned, developers must be capable of doing between them all the work that's required. So in construction, it's the guy who measures, builds. I'm sorry, I don't know construction, but building, yeah, QAing, all that stuff. And then there's the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is their role is to make sure that everyone is not just doing Scrum, but doing it effectively. That means that they are removing blockers and they are providing value to the team. People think the Scrum Master does nothing, and that's because a bad Scrum Master does nothing. A good Scrum Master is making sure that everyone is getting value, and if there's not, through the process, then they have to figure out a way to make value. So here we are, our 3 accountabilities. Can either of you guess why I colored these 3 orange? Because there are individuals. Yes, there you go. I do a lot of color coding here, but yes, that's the secret. These are our individuals who are interacting, and they will be operating. The values that they operate on is commitment to the sprint and to each other and to whatever their goal is. Focus on the goal. They need to be open with one another and the company, because there's a lot of transparency as we went over, and they need to have respect for each other, because they're going to get into each other's business, and if people are bullying each other, this is going to fall apart. And the courage to try something new. This is not easy. It can be the learning process can be really frustrating, and so that courage is necessary to take on that work. So we're going to start. Oh, look, we got another guy. Hi, Claver. Nice to meet you. Thanks for joining us. So now you just got right to the beginning of Scrum. So we got our 3 people. So our 3 roles. But we're going to start off with the product owner. So here he is. This is where, as I mentioned, every project begins with the product owner. So what's the product owner going to do? Well, the product owner has been tasked with this new assignment. They're going to create a new website to sell America's fastest growing product. It's going to be shoes for ducks. I invented this great product. You want to hear something hilarious, and this is true. If you one of my friends and mentors named Chris, I did this presentation for his meetup group, and he bought the URL shoesforducks.com. And if you type shoesforducks.com into any URL, it will redirect to my LinkedIn. That is true. He did that for me. Anyway, sorry. So we're going to develop Shoes for Ducks. And so here are our stakeholders. I colored them blue because they are customers that we're collaborating with. And they're going to come up to the product owner, and they're going to say, this is what we need for a website that sells shoes to ducks. Shoes for ducks, excuse me. They need to be able to see all the items for sale. They need to be able to buy the items. They need to be able to sort or filter items. These are the product owner's requirements. So now we're going to get from, we have our requirements on the left. We're going to get from these requirements on the left, we're going to do something magical to them, right? Question mark, question mark, question mark. We're going to get to working software. This is where, hold on, this is where your brain will like melt. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible on this particular topic because it is easily the least interesting, most dry. I'm going to try and make it fun though. Okay, so how do you build something, right? You've got a requirement, but a requirement's not necessarily a, it's a theoretical requirement, but like it's not, like what is that? You say they need to see all the items for sale. It should be like on a little carousel? Should it be like on Amazon where it's all laid out? Should it be like we flash them based on like how, right? There's so many questions that need to be asked. So like, how do we do something as basic as that? And so you create the product owner based on his conversations or his or her conversations with the stakeholder will create a product backlog item. Generally speaking, people just call it a user story, but this is what it is. So what the product backlog item essentially is we'll go through what it is, but it describes, we're just going to go through it. I'm just going to jump into it. So you've got this post-it note, and you're going to start off every good post-it note, every good user story, sorry, every good product backlog item begins with a user story. A user story is where you just generally write the use case in the shoes of your customer or duck. So keep it simple. As the owner of a duck, I want to view all potential shoes for ducks so that I may find the right shoes for my duck. Right? Should be simple enough. Right? That's what we're building. So then you want to have what's called an acceptance criteria. An acceptance criteria means now that we understand our user, what exactly are they looking for? An acceptance criteria is, it answers the question, is it a carousel? Is it a splash page? Is it like, how does it work? What does it look like? The product owner writes that down of like, it's basically just a checklist of your requirements, again, from your stakeholder. Then we have story points. I hate to describe this. I always screw up doing it, but here we go. It's an abstract concept, and it is not a time estimate. It is an nebulous abstract number that helps your team understand how much work something is going to take. Work is measured generally in time, complexity, and risk. So, and it is relative to other stories. So the way to describe this is, to put it simple, let's say I have a task of picking up my pen, like this. Like, here's my pen, I just picked it up. That is something that I would describe as low effort, low complexity, low risk. That's going to be a 1. Then we have a more complicated thing where I'm going to write down 4 sentences. Well, 4 sentences compared to picking up my pens, there's more effort there, right? Because I have to use my brain. There's more complexity there because I actually have to write something that's interesting and valuable. And then there's risk because I might get lazy and I might only write 2 sentences. So then I would say, well, I would say compared to picking up my pen, writing 4 sentences is 4 times, 5 times more complex, more risky, or it's that measurement. It's just like an understanding. And the reason you do this is because you want to be able to get a grasp on how difficult the work is. A lot of people like to measure difficulty by time, but it's not considered too conducive because it doesn't really measure like how difficult something actually was. It just measures like just measures how long it took. This is a much better estimate because it really shows kind of like the effort or how productive your team is. It's a relative estimation, so as I said, writing sentences 4 times harder, 5 times harder than picking up a pen. It is only useful for the team. It does not provide any value to executives or other teams. I will bet $100 to anyone here who is planning to take the PMP, you will get this question. I would guarantee it, something of this nature, where it will say, Team 1 does 40 story points in a sprint. Team 2 does 60 story points in a sprint. Which team is working harder? It's going to say, well, the one with 40, the one with 60. The correct answer is not enough information is given. And this is because something like effort, complexity of risk is completely subjective. It's not objective. So writing 4 sentences for me can be a 4. Maybe it's only a 2 for Luber because he's just a better writer than me. But it's just relative to our team. If we're all really good at writing and really bad at other things, another team can't really use those estimates because, again, it's just subjective to them. It is determined and discussed by only those doing the work. Does anyone have any questions on this? It's a complicated one, but I wanted to ask. I wanted to just check in. Okay. I didn't hear anything. I wanted to go through it just because it's a common question in all Agile exams. But yeah, it's definitely So we're just going to move on from that. This is what a completed story looks like. You've got your user story, so you put your feet, feet in the shoes of your user. Over here, you've got your requirements that you're trying to build. This is like your actual checklist, right, of things that the website must do. Up in our nice corner, we have our estimate of how much complexity, effort, and risk there is. And we've got our user story. There you go. It's a little messy. So now we have an understanding of our project. Now we know, our product. I messed up. And so we are going to now take all of our stories and we're going to place them into the product backlog. So this is where we get interesting. If you fell asleep, that's okay. Wake up. I understand story points melt people's eyes out of their heads. Let's get back to action. Okay. So we're on the product backlog. This is where it gets exciting. So we got all of our stories. We built them all up. Here they are. And we're going to be organizing. The product backlog lists all the things that you need to work on, will work on. All of your stories are based on priority. So whatever's at the top of the backlog is the most important. Whatever's in the bottom of the backlog is the least important. Thanks for joining, MCM. What's really unique about the product backlog, you joined at a good time. Everybody joins at interesting intervals because it's we're about to start a new topic. So I'll just start for MCM's sake. So hi MCM, thanks for joining us. We've got a full understanding of our product, and now we are going to go into the actual building of the product. So here we are. We have our product backlog. We've got our stories. Each of these little yellow cards represents a component of what we're building. And so what we're doing here is priority 1, right here, that's what we're building. And then anything that is in the second position is the second most important, and so on and so forth. So you're constantly moving, the product owner, is constantly moving things up and down based on what the stakeholders are saying, what the marketplace conditions are, etc. It is transparent. Anyone can come and comment upon it. So management can come and look, and the stakeholders can come and look, and everyone can see what your priority is. The PO the PO inspects it and makes sure, based on the feedback that they're getting, because it's so open that anyone can comment on it, that they are taking these things into consideration, and they adapt it. based on that. So they think, oh, I talked to some stakeholder, this needs to be added in the second position. This is brand new. Every product needs to have a product goal. Your product goal is a milestone that all of your stories are building up to. And the reason that you have a product goal is because if you don't have a product goal, what everyone does is they throw a bunch of garbage on your backlog that has nothing to do with the product, and it's really obnoxious, and you can just say to everyone, hey, this is our goal. Does this align with what we're working on? And if the answer is no, then it doesn't belong here. Go send it to another team or throw it in the trash or wait until we shift into that kind of work. But right now, our product goal, this is what we're prioritizing. One more thing I want to point out, product owner, as you can see, is at the very top of the slide. The product owner is the owner of this. So the rule is no one is allowed to add anything to the backlog. No one is allowed to move anything from the backlog. They are the sole controllers of this. And this is important because if management goes, I want you to build a rocket ship in 2 days, they can say, or I want you to build a rocket ship. They'll say, hey, we're not doing that. We are not building a rocket ship. It clashes with our goal. Go find a team that wants to do it. The product goal can shift a little bit. But if you find your product goal is going like from here to there to everywhere, that's a bad sign. If your product goal is like, as you're doing the work, narrowing or shifting ever so slightly based on like marketplace conditions, that's very normal and healthy and good. But if you find that like your goal is like heads and tails every day, that's a project in dysfunction. It should not shift much, or unless the marketplace conditions are on fire, like COVID 2 got announced. Knock on wood, God forbid. So that's your product backlog that your product owner has. Now we're going to go to our sprint backlog. The sprint backlog is the backlog of things that lists what we are currently working on. Product backlog is what we will work on. Sprint backlog is what we are working on. Every sprint should have a sprint goal. Unlike the product goal, the sprint goal is locked in for the entirety of the sprint. It should not shift. It should not change. It should be what it is. This third slide, this is just like a fact of the matter. It's based on like when you want it to be implemented. Most people just throw their things into the product backlog, a sprint backlog, willy-nilly, but technically there is an order. It is transparent in that anyone can view it. The old rule, if you remember the old rule is you cannot ever, once something is in the sprint backlog, it's in the sprint backlog, period. You don't move stories from in and out of the sprint backlog during the sprint. That has changed. They updated it, and they said that you are allowed to move items in and out of the sprint backlog, but it needs to be two things. It needs to be in service of the sprint goal. So don't work on things that aren't related to the sprint goal. And if you find yourself changing the sprint goal, that is a moment of reflection, which we'll get to. But remember this, and this is very important. Things need to be moved with intentionality. And what I mean by that is, if you find that like there is 6 items in your sprint backlog, and then you throw them all out and grab 6 new stories, then you throw them all out and you grab 6 new stories, and you grab 6 of the old stories, and things are just moving like chaotically, and it feels like people are changing every single day, different requirements. Bad. That's not what you're supposed to do. There needs to be like thoughtfulness. There needs to be an understanding. There needs to be, you need to be able to this is part of like why being a Scrum Master requires a lot of like emotional intelligence, because you need to be able to detect, are things moving because of chaos, or is there good intentionality behind it? If there's chaos, you need to put an end to it. If it's intentional, that's different. One thing you're going to also notice is that the sprint backlog, it has 3 devs on it. Has the developer team on the top, right? The product backlog is owned by the product owner. Sprint backlog is owned by the developers, aka the people doing the work. This is done specifically because if the product owner goes up to the developers and says, I want to build a rocket ship in 2 days. Developers can go, no, we're not putting that in the sprint backlog, because if we put that in the sprint backlog, we're committing to that, and we're not doing that. And so you have this friendly conflict, I like to call it, or if your company is dysfunctional, not so friendly conflict, where your team is fighting amongst themselves, again, hopefully friendly, going, the product owner goes, I want to put this in. They go, we're not feeling this, and you guys work it out from there. That's on purpose. That's intentional. There's supposed to be that like kind of friendly conflict in a functional team. The final thing that I want to show you is the burn down chart. The burn down chart is not official part of Scrum, but it's very common, so I wanted to bring it up. It shows how much work is remaining in the sprint. So on the left, there's the amount of work that's left, and then on the bottom, there's the time remaining in the sprint. This is what your sprint would ideally look like. Every day you do a little bit of it, and then eventually you get to the bottom of no work. My father, who is a Scrum Master, once described this in the top left as the liar's sprint, the liar's burn down chart, because it never is this clean. It never looks this good. Like, no, it's always a mess. I like to say that every story, every sprint burn down chart tells a story. I can kind of see what your company looks like based on your sprint burn down chart. So like, look over here. This is either a liar or a perfectly good company that just does great work every day. Over here on the right, this is a team that like doesn't like to update anything. So they like didn't update anything, and then they realize that they have to like update everything because we're at the end of the sprint. So they just close all the tickets. It could also be a sign that they're closing all the tickets to impress their company. It could be over here, right? They did nothing they didn't like declare anything done for a couple days. Then they added some stuff. Then they did nothing. Then they closed a bunch of stuff. Then they did nothing. Then they started working. Okay, so it's like you look at this and you're like, okay, well, why did it go up? Why did it drop down? Why did we do nothing? Why is it now perfect? Right? And then you're just like, what is this? Like, what? You guys are doing work. You guys are getting work, then doing work, then getting work, then doing work, then getting work. We need to have a talk. This is not how it's supposed to look, right? So again, I can tell exactly the level of dysfunction in your team by looking at your burn down chart. It comes built into Jira. I actually have a funny story. Remember how I talked about intentionality here? This is just a fun story I love to tell. I had a sprint once. I was at a company. I was a Scrum Master. And I was looking at my sprint backlog. And we had, we started off with like 15 points. And we had closed 6 of them. So we had 9 left. I went home for the day. I came back. I checked the backlog in the morning. We had 42 points left to do. It went from 9 to 42 with like 2 days left in the sprint. And I went, why is that happening? And what I found out was that one of the senior vice presidents got mad at like a manager or a director and said, we're falling behind. We're falling behind to the competition. We need to be working on this. We need to be working on that. We also need to be working on this other thing. And the guy responded by saying, we are. So he ran into so as he was yelling these orders, he started just jamming things willy-nilly into the backlog. That's like an example of not being intentional by any means. But I like to tell the story. So like our sprint backlog, like it looked like this, and then just like running off the map. I love telling that story. So that's not what you want to have happen. Any questions so far? No questions, so we'll continue. We're getting near the end. So those are sort of like your ceremonies. Now we're going to actually do the process. Now we're going to put it all together. So this is what you got right now, if you've been following along. You got your Scrum Masters hanging off in the corner. Don't worry about the Scrum Master for now. He's cool, or she's cool. Then we got our stakeholders. Our stakeholders are feeding requirements to our product owner. Our product owner is turning them into user stories. And then we got our devs who represent the entire realm of what needs to be done. They're standing by waiting for things to come to their backlog. Looks cool, right? So the engine of every Scrum team is the sprint. The sprint is a time-boxed session of work in which work is being done, generally 1 or 2 weeks. The time box um, only works, only work that is in the sprint backlog, only work that is in this backlog is allowed to be done. Only work that aligns to the sprint goal is allowed to be in the backlog. So once again, just to repeat it. Once you declare your sprint's time box and you've started your sprint's time box, it cannot be altered at all. One of the common things that people get is some people will go up to you and say, oh man, and you'll get this on the PMP test. I will bet my freaking $200. Let me know if you take it and I'm wrong. You will get this question. The question will be, oh man, I have this, I was almost done. I'm like 10 minutes away from finishing this. The sprint's over, but I just need another 2 hours. Can I please jam it in? The answer is no. The answer is no. And I'm going to explain to you exactly why. The reason is because of 2 reasons. Well, I'll explain it in sprint planning, but the answer is no. Once it's started, it's supposed to go into motion until it's done. Every sprint starts with a planning meeting. We're going to get there, and ends with a retrospective. We'll also get there. There are no breaks between sprints. Once a sprint ends, another one starts until the project is done. So remember, if you were here for the agile portion of this, you remember the term indefinite sustainable pace. This is part of that. You are working, every sprint is not a burnout sprint. You are working at an indefinite sustainable pace. Some people call it an event. I call it a frame of mind. So now we're at sprint planning. So our goal in sprint planning is, as my little purple arrows show, to move items from the product backlog into the sprint backlog based on what the sprint goal is, which is determined by the team based on what the product owner basically thinks is the most important things to work on. We talked earlier about this is my best practice and this is my feeling on the subject. A lot of people, when they do their backlog planning and they think you answer the question, what are we going to get done over the course of the next 2 weeks? What a lot of people, I think, make the mistake in is they think to themselves, they think, okay, it's the bottom of, I've got 1 hour left in the sprint or 10 minutes left in the sprint, and the clock is ticking and the sands in the hourglass are ticking down, and I've got the last story in my hands, and as I got this buzzer beater, I switch it on Jira to done within the last 2.5 minutes of the sprint. It's a buzzer beater, right? And it's cool when that happens, by the way. It's always cool when you at the very last second finish the sprint. But I would dare say that that's a bad sprint. It's not. It's a successful sprint because you've completed everything. It's a bad in my view because you're supposed to, when you're doing the sprint planning, your goal is to create things that you are to commit to a level of work that you can confidently finish. If you're finding yourself doing a lot of last second buzzer beater moments, you're not delivering with confidence because it's too close for comfort. It's too close of a shave. You want to make sure to give yourself that little bit of buffer, in my opinion, as you're moving your priorities of the next 2 weeks into the sprint backlog. I mentioned to you the time box. Why is it unalterable when it's been put into motion? The idea is the goal of the sprint and the goal of Scrum is to be able to, as I said, confidently declare what we are working on and how long it's going to take. So what that means is if we go up and we say, if we realize that we can do 15 story points a sprint and we need to do 10 story points, we can go up to management and say it will be done because we are confident in that, because we know our capabilities. And so you want to, again, you don't want to again, in my opinion, you don't want a buzzer beater moment. As I mentioned in the previous slide, PO and developers are to negotiate on what goes into the backlog. It's very normal as long as it's not toxic. The backlog, there's something called the definition of done. The definition of done is what is a quality standard checklist that all stories need to meet in order to be considered complete. So it's very important that the team, they aren't just if I'm coding and I just like grab my pen and I write down like, it's important that I don't just like write like, with my pen, this is my code, this is my thing, and then I just submit it to be done, and the whole team's like, hey, you did that on your work. So the idea of like, the definition of done is an understanding by the whole team. The whole team comes together and goes, this is our definition of done. We as a team agree that this is done. And so it can be the whole team needs to check out on it. QA needs to do some approval. It needs to be it needs to meet some quality standard. It's just everyone in the team. The idea is that everyone in the team can swear by it. Is the simplest way to think about it. What does it mean to have the whole team swear by it? There is a best practice. This isn't in the Scrum guide, but you may find this in the company, in the world. It's called the definition of ready. It is, in order to have the definition of done is when an item is in the sprint and it is done, how do I know that I can show it to my boss that's done? The definition of ready is this story is ready to go into the sprint backlog. And so sometimes that is the PO has consulted with this many people. There are all the developers can confidently declare that they are capable of doing all the technical requirements. There are no external dependencies. This is just like a question of just as this is a sign, just as the definition of done is like what does it take for you to swear that it is done, for the team to confidently say that something is done, even if they don't necessarily see it as individuals. The definition of ready is what can the team swear by to say this is ready to be worked on, even if not every single individual sees it. Okay, so now we're on backlog refinement. We're almost done. Should take about another 10 minutes. Thanks for hanging out and giving me your Tuesday. Backlog refinement is designed to get the product backlog in shape for sprint planning. So during backlog refinement, the team, this is just like a separate meeting where the team comes together and they can add new stories, they can remove stories they no longer feel are necessary, they can swap priority, and they can break stories down. Breaking stories down is the art in which the product owner comes up to you and says, I want a rocket ship in 2 days. And they go, no. So then they take the story and they break the rocket ship into 100 different components. And then they say, I want this component done in 2 days. And they go, okay. That's the idea of breaking a story down. You're splitting a story so that these two represent 100% of the work that's in this bigger one, but you've broken it down. And you can throw this one away because it's represented in these ones. And that's just helps people work. Remember, anything you have, the sprint is time boxed, anything that can't be done in 2 weeks should be broken down and done so that it can be done within 2 weeks. In other words, this is a transparent process in which the team can inspect and adapt the backlog. All right, so our team, again, Scrum Master, monitoring the situation, stakeholders, feeding information to the product owner. They put in the product backlog. The team refines the backlog, makes sure that right things are prioritized, things are moved. Stories are moving in and out of the sprint backlog with intentionality, and the devs are making sure that that's happening. We're getting close. We're getting close to the end. The daily Scrum is a sync, and I'm going to explain to you the difference between a status report and a sync. Excuse me, very soon. Your goal is to inspect and adapt the sprint. It is time boxed to 15 minutes. If you are a longtime practitioner of Scrum, you may have heard or have done the 3 questions, which are, what did you do? What will you do? Do you have any blockers? The 3 questions have been done away with, so that's your trivia, not really useful. There's only 1 question that you ask now. What are we doing to move the sprint closer to move closer to the sprint goal? We have a goal. What are we doing to get ourselves closer to that goal? That is your 1 question. If there are any blockers for a developer, the Scrum Master is the one who is tasked with unblocking that developer. The daily Scrum, I'm just going to give you like rules of the road or rules of some take. The daily Scrum, according to the Scrum Guide, so if you're taking the exams, is open to everyone. Management can sit in on it. However, rule of thumb is as Scrum Master, you should kick out your manager and make sure there's no managers and it's only the team. And that's because the daily Scrum becomes performative if management is around. If it's just you and your teammates, and I ask you, are you having any trouble? Can I help you with something? Are you blocked by something? You'll go, yeah, I'm really confused by this thing. It's really just stumping me. I'm really annoyed by it. If your management's in the room and I tell you, how are things going? Are you stumped by anything? They'll go, of course not. Because why would you ever admit to your boss that you're being stumped by something? It's just, so again, if you're reading the Scrum Guide, anyone can attend this daily Scrum, the sync. But if you're asking like kind of like the experienced people, you shouldn't do it. The final thing I want to go off of is that the daily sync that is 15 minutes. My opinion is, or not my opinion, it is referred to as a sync, not a status meeting. And I remember when I heard that, I went, cool branding. Those are the same thing. A sync and a status meeting are the same exact thing. No. Turns out I was wrong. I believed that for about 10 years. Finally, someone explained to me, and I felt like a fool ever since. A stand-up meeting, I'm sorry, a status meeting is person A goes, this is the situation. Person B says this situation. Person C says this situation. A sync works differently. A sync is your team is getting into each other's business and is syncing on what they're working on and what they need from each other. So it's, I'm working on this, I need help, and then I'm going to give it over to Charlie, and then Charlie goes, really? I didn't know that that was the plan. And the point of a sync, the way you want to think about it, is you're not just telling the status, you're trying to get your team talking to each other. One of the toughest things the Scrum Master do, especially when you have a lot of introverts on your team, you need your team talking to each other, trying to get people involved in each other's business. Trying to get your team involved in each other's business, talking to each other, understanding what they do, understanding what their processes are. So because if I understand that QA needs to do the following in order to get it through QA, I'm going to do something different so that we can get those boxes clear. If QA needs to prove XYZ, I'm going to try and make XYZ as obvious as possible so that we can get through QA quickly. That's what a sync is. Whereas a status is just like, I'm doing this, and QA, whatever. All right. We are getting there. We're getting so close. So we've done all of our stuff. We've got our potentially shippable increment. What is our potentially shippable increment? I might not have, if I went over it, I'll go over it again. Potentially shippable increment is it's a piece, it's an item that you can interact with. That's basically it. It doesn't have to be fully good on its own. It has to be interactable. So I've got a pen in my hand. You might be able to hear it clicking. The clicker is a potentially shippable increment because I can give it to a customer. The customer can go, can you actually hear it? Maybe. And you'll go, oh, this click, it sounds really good, or it sounds really bad. We'll get to that. So a potentially shippable increment is an item that you can test, feel, touch, engage. It's not papers, it's not documentation, it's not code. It's something that the customer can actually put their hands on. And so the guy can go, oh, this clicking is annoying. Oh, it's great. It's not what right? And so you can get, when you review with your stakeholders, right, anyone can attend this meeting, and your stakeholders are inspecting what you've done, and they'll say like, oh, this is perfect, or this is not what I had in mind at all, or I just realized that it won't work without, now that I see it in action, it won't work without this other feature, or Amazon did it better, and we should copy them, right? Their feedback, the idea is that even if you don't have like the writing part of the clicker done, they can test it, they give feedback, you can figure out whether or not you're on the right track, which is really good when you're only like 10% of your project through, as opposed to like doing the whole project in and out and then realizing that like you've made garbage. It's better to make 2 weeks of garbage than 6 months of garbage. The feedback is adapted into future iterations of the product. Then, after you're done reviewing what it is you've created, what your product is, you review the process. So generally, the sprint review retrospective happens right after the sprint review. You just kick everyone out except the team. The Scrum team gathers together and they talk about what went right and what went wrong. Praise the good, acknowledge the improvables. Um, this is very important. It is not a blame game. We win or lose as a team. Only the team is allowed to attend because just like the daily stand-up, no one is going to admit to doing something wrong if other people are in the room, if their management is in the room. This is why the Scrum Master is not capable of firing anyone. This is because if the Scrum Master is capable of firing people, then, or hiring or promoting or anything like that, then the developer will never be honest because why the hell would they? They want to keep their job, don't they? So um, that's important. And so this is the only thing that's not actually transparent. It's transparent to the team, but it's not transparent to the company. A process improvement idea should be revealed with the intention of adapting it into the next sprint. Sometimes it's called a Kaizen, but it's just a process improvement that you guys want to try and see if it will work. You guys can review it. Any kind of thing that you worked on. So in the past, we talked about a lot of common mistakes. Sometimes you will move things chaotically in and out of the backlog. Sometimes someone will make something that's buggy. Sometimes anytime the question comes up of the improvable, this is where you talk about it. And look at that. This is it. Look at this. Look at this. So the purple, if you didn't catch on, responding to change. So this right here, if you can memorize the slide and understand it, you will understand Scrum entirely. You have your stakeholders, they're feeding information to your product owner. Product owner who owns the backlog is going to create stories out of the information. Your team is going to refine that based on priority and what they feel is right and doable. They move things in and out of the backlog, which is controlled by the devs. The team does a daily scrum where they look at the backlog and ask what they're doing to get closer to the sprint goal. After working, they'll create something, a shippable increment, something you can play with, something you can test. The team and the stakeholders come together, they review what was created, feedback is given, put into the product backlog, and then and then the retrospective happens where the Scrum Master is both monitoring all of this and making sure it's good and it provides value and it's very useful. And they're running the sprint retrospective and they're making sure, like I said, it provides value and that it follows the 3 pillars of Scrum. And that is it. That was Scrum. Woo! That was Scrum in an hour and 10 minutes, basically. Actually, we started 10 minutes late. That's Scrum in an hour. That's Scrum and Agile in an hour. You guys are all part of the Discord, so you don't have to. I did make an iOS app, so if you guys want to download some fun apps. But finally, in conclusion, thank you guys for taking the time to listen. As the Scrum Guide says, oh no, this is the Agile Manifesto says, we're uncovering better ways of developing software and helping others do it by doing it and helping others do it. So I appreciate the opportunity to present. I get better at doing it every time. So thank you. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm glad. I'm glad. Hi. Yeah, I try to do something fun every Tuesday. We can talk about SAFe. Yeah, we'll do SAFe like either next Tuesday or two. Do you want to talk about it now? Yeah, we'll talk about SAFe. So SAFe is a scaled agile framework. I don't have a presentation on it. It is significantly more tricky and challenging than most Scrum frameworks. Let's look at it real quick, actually. Hold on. Let me pull it up. Am I sharing screen properly? No, hold on. Change windows. Oh, this is a tough one. So I'm not very well versed in SAFe. But basically the idea of SAFe is that you have a... Where's like the big one? It's like a... They simplify it? Here's like the real one. Go away. This is safe. So like you basically, the idea of it is that you create something called an agile release train, which is right here. And the goal of the agile release train is as you develop, so I'm jumping ahead of myself. So let's say you have like several teams that you want to sync up because you have a big project and you need to sync up because um, you're trying to move quickly and you need multiple teams all together. They have something called an agile release train, and basically there's like 30 different certifications in this, but it follows a similar theme. It has new roles like the release train engineer, and like there's a bigger backlog, and yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not super familiar with it. I like if you're looking for if you're asking about safe because you're just interested in scaled. I'm much better at Scrum of Scrums, which is a much like simpler and I'd say more holistic way of doing it. Did you have a specific question on safe? Yeah. So yeah. So your question on safe in general, it's very popular. A lot of people in the industry hate it because of like it's very rigid and it can be very challenging because you've got so many people and you're doing so many different things. Maybe I'll bring a speaker to speak about safe, but yeah, I'm not too familiar with it. Any other questions? No problem. All right. Well, if you have any other questions, please feel free. You guys can, if you're watching this somewhere, you can just join the Discord. But if you're not, yeah, please. Yes. Uh, I can I can make it view only and share them. I have no problem with that. No problem. Any other questions? Okay, well, if you guys have any questions, Discord is cool because you can just ask them, and yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions after that. Thank you guys for joining. My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you, and see you all soon. Bye. That's it. Heck yeah.